So this is a kind of 2 times presentation. Today is going to be the first of it, and tomorrow the second part, and I'm going to explain why we have decided to split it. This analysis is supported in a research that we are about to start now for European universities, supported by the European Commission, particularly in the Latin American area, in order to strengthen and promote the adoption of OER, particularly OpenCourseWare within the higher education institutions in the region. So as we speak, we are now collecting the information and applying a lot of surveys at the same time with policymakers, decision makers, educators and students along the region. So far we have some information that we thought that could be interesting to share with you in order to open a discussion about what can we do in that area of the world, right? So this is why I don't have all the data that I would like to have. But this is because, as I said, we are collecting the information. So instead of that, I will focus on the rationality behind the adoption of OER and the adoption of bringing innovation into education, which I think is pretty important. And I'm going to use 2 very old concepts. One is the diffusion of innovation, very well known by many of you, and other one which is even older, which is the radical and the incremental innovation, these concepts used by Schumpeter many years ago. So, as you know very well, when we talk about innovation, we face innovation in different ways, and different groups and different institutions adopt the innovation in different paths. We are more or less flexible depending on our capability to face the uncertainty and our capability to be more or less socially recognized in terms of innovation. So we are all the time in this curve of adoption. Sometimes we are very well developed, very well ahead, sometimes we're left behind. And in addition of this diffusion, and I will try to overlap this with what has been happening in the last 10 years with OpenCourseWare since it was launched by the MIT, there's this other concept which has to do with the radical and the incremental innovation. So we know very well that the radical innovation could be a bit more extreme, and where the performances break out in a different way, not always very well understood by the partners, could be more dramatic and develop sometimes some transformations that not make everybody pleased. Now, at the same time, we have this other sort of more invisible innovation, if you want, more incremental, which is based on the improvement or the optimization of the things that we are doing and doing them even better. So I thought that these very old-fashioned concepts could be very useful to think a bit of what has been happening about in terms of the promotion of OER and particularly the OpenCourseWare. 2001, the first days of April, just 1 day before was launched the OpenCourseWare in MIT, and I'm really pleased that our colleague is here. The New York Times published this report. Not all of us are very friends of the New York Times, but published this report, this news, where they were announcing this very outstanding idea of bringing the courses for free. And it was very interesting because in the same article, universities like Stanford or the UCLA, they were showing some of their concerns about this crazy idea of bringing openness to their OER, or the educational resources. And at the same time, Guardian, the same day, was saying that only 2 universities at this time, we are talking about like prehistoric times, so it was like just 10 years ago, 2 universities in the world were dealing with these sort of things. I know that must make you feel very old, but this is very short time, so you don't have to be worried about that. Now, it's interesting because in a very short time, this adoption and the increasing adoption of the OCU has been evolving very quickly, but I think it's important to understand the tiny little difference between the radical innovation and the incremental innovation in terms of adopting the innovation of others. Now, interestingly enough, particularly in the last 6 months, we can sort of envision that the evolving of the OER is not the adoption of repositories is not the end of the story. Particularly what has been happening in the Stanford University, that you must be familiar with, some of you, the MITx announcing, which is putting a lot of people nervous, the MOOCs, the massive online courses, and many other initiatives, the peer-to-peer university. I mean, there's a lot of things happening going on nowadays, which is bringing much more complexity to the adoption of the OER with a bigger picture and with many, many dimensions behind that. So, in the same way that we have been saying for years that it's not the same to be accessible than open, and there are a lot of grace degrees of evolution in between, I think it's important in this discussion to say or have a similar perspective when we think that OER is not the same than OEP. And OEP, as I said, have been in the last few months popping up some very interesting and outstanding examples of things that I think is important to keep in mind. In our specific case, when we will be promoting and pushing to increase the awareness of why these sort of things are important to bring in the discussion, I think it's important to do not forget that there are a lot of dimensions in this area. Now, I'm not really sure, at least talking about the Latin American context, I'm not very sure how well prepared are the higher education institutions to deal with these sort of levels of uncertainty. But I think it's interesting when Farrow from the Open University mentioned that it makes very little sense to talk about OER without taking into account the OEP and the challenge that face. So I think it's a distributed revolution, but it's mostly a revolution in English so far, and unfortunately this is a topic that has to evolve very strong. Now, let me show you some snapshots about Latin America in order to explain somehow what is the context where we are dealing with. So in this region there are almost 600 million of inhabitants, which is a bit basically speaking Spanish and Portuguese, including Brazil. Roughly 3,000 universities plus 7,000 higher education institutions. So this is more or less what is happening in the region in terms of numbers. So the size is quite significant. And this is, by the way, this is a picture of people posting and creating contents online through Wikipedia. So this is a geotagged picture of the world uploading contents, and you can see that 85% of the contents created in Wikipedia are coming from Europe and the US. So it's very interesting where we find some dark areas here in terms of content production and uploading of information. So when we make the first exploration, it was very interesting to see the lack of research about OER in the region. I'm not saying that there's none of them, but it's very little, and there's almost nothing in terms of the regional perspective. So just to give you an idea, when we went to the Web of Knowledge and we scanned the first 100 results published within 2009, 2012, we found only 3 papers about this topic related with Latin America. Something similar happened with Google Books in the same period of time and Google Scholar. And it's highly concentrated in just few countries like Argentina, Ecuador, and Brazil, and Mexico. Now, there are some outstanding initiatives existing, not enough, but outstanding, and I would like to briefly explain you, to give you a bit of flavor of what is going on in that region. So, one of the main brokers in the region in the promotion of OER is Universia, which is this network of 1,000 universities. It's a partnership between Spanish universities, Portuguese, and Latin American ones. Now, it's very interesting when you go to the details and you see that from these 1,000 universities, which constitute that network of universities in collaboration and exchange, 70 of them are collaborating in the development of the OpenCourseWare. 70 of 1,000. Now, in terms of courses, there are 196 courses existing, and almost the half of them are concentrated in 4 universities. So it's very interesting because the expertise of these early adopters are very clearly identified, but the rest is very low in terms of numbers if you consider this massive volume that I previously explained about how big is that region. Now, there's a outstanding practices or best practice, if you want, like this one, Temoa, that I really recommend you to explore, which is an index of OER resources in different languages, where they make a process of selection, and then they provide some taxonomies in order to make them findable and identifiable. It's easy to identify for the educators who sometimes don't have enough time, or they wouldn't like to spend too much time searching for those resources. So then they have 30,000 of those. Unfortunately, a few weeks ago I learned that many of them are just copy and paste from different databases, so these numbers are not particularly reliable, but we will have to do definitely more research about that. And there are a couple of directories of open access journals. There are two main ones: Cielo, which is spread in the whole region, and Redalic, which I'm sure that my colleague from Mexico is very familiar with. Each one of them has something like 700 journals. This is roughly 200,000 articles per each one of these directories. Interesting numbers in terms of citations, 4 million each. So there are a few things going on in the region, certainly not as well developed as we would like to, but it's interesting, the process of evolution. This is, for instance, this is a good hint of what is going on. Universia, at the beginning, they were promoting helping in the translation of the contents, of external contents, into the local language. And now they are moving to this following step, which is promoting and training the educators in order to upload their contents. So, using this metaphor of white and mountain, we do believe, or we state as an hypothesis, that there's a very little concentration of things over the level of water, the surface, and there are a massive amount of resources user-generated, let's call it that way, by educators who are probably not using any very well-developed taxonomy, or maybe those resources are not very easy to identify, but these are kind of hidden in this gray area of non-institutionalized production of resources. So this problem of invisibility, I think, is the main challenge that we have to deal with. I'm not sure that this is an exclusive problem of Latin America. I would suggest that would be interesting to explore it in other places. So certainly we all have to deal with the resistance of change. And Hattaka, he created this interesting report which was called something like "Build, but do you think they will come?" or something like that. And he identifies some key constraints that the people have in order to adopt, promote, or get used to with the OER philosophy which is behind. Some of them, as you can see, are legal and technical, but many of them are more related with the skills and the training that people have, or they lack. Now, I'll finalize with some of the challenge that I think it's important to keep in mind, and I would be very pleased to know if these are only challenges of the region, or we can consider them as challenge in a broader sense. In the lunch, Fred and I, we were discussing about how interesting is that when the OER was pushing in an early stage 10 years ago, one of the common sayings was these sort of things will be broadly used by the developing countries. But now we can see 10 years later that it's not that clear that these regions of the world are already taking advantage of that. Probably because of the lack of knowledge, the lack of training, could be many reasons. But the content so far being broadly developed by developed countries, if we like to use that taxonomy, but it's not that clear that those regions, at least the Latin American one, are really taking advantage of these resources. So I will highlight a few of the challenges that we think that are important to keep in mind. In terms of the archipelago that usually happen when we talk about the uploading of educational resources, we need to move to the spaghetti. which is this idea to create resources which are easily connected through smart metadata, and we are very lack of common standards in terms of common agreement. Sorry, we are not lack of common standards, we are lack of common agreements to embrace them. And something pretty similar has to do with the platforms, and there are a lot of tension and discussion about the platforms, and sometimes when the geeks are not able to find common agreements, we have these massive problems of interoperability. That's why I was highlighting this Temoa experience, which is somehow an open directory that can offer you one single spot to access to different databases, which I think is a good idea. The third one is a massive challenge in different levels certainly, but has to do with awareness of licenses. We don't need to be a lawyer to understand the importance of that, but I really miss a deeper understanding of these sort of things and a broader discussion about these sort of things in different careers in the universities. And in the same sense, that has to do with this new literacies that we have to develop in the faculties, but also in the students in terms of the value of generating and uploading contents. This is another picture of colleagues of us in the OII in Oxford who have been picturing the wall of who are uploading contents. So I guess again we have the technology, we have the licenses. It's cheaper than ever. But anyway, people are not using these sort of things. Potentially, we think because of the lack of knowledge. And here, in terms of new incentives, I think is a key driver in order to change the rationale behind. Many incentive systems in the region, they're still not broadly adopted, not broadly embracing the importance of stimulate somehow the adoption of open directories of open journal directories, or on the other way, as the European Research Council has been promoting, after a certain amount of months that our research has been published in a paper in a journal, the result has to be online for free in an open access journal. So just to finalize, I would like to wrap up everything in this slide. It's interesting to see that even that we have the resources online, the availability, the cultural thing is the main barrier that sometimes we find, and the customization of resources, even if they're highly valuable, sometimes take more time than create a new resource. So even if a resource, open educational resource, is available online, to adapt them to my context could be more demanding and more challenging than just create my new one. And some few final ideas that I'm pretty sure that you must be familiar with. Open is not the same than sustainable. And this is important because we have to somehow promote the idea, but always the concerns about sustainability is a problem when the public fundings are gone. Access
isn't sustainable either.
Sorry?
Closed is not sustainable either.
Okay.
Just
thank you.
Make it clear.
Access is not the same than use. So, and use is not the same than learning, which is something that has been happening with the computers in education in other areas as well. And one big problem that we have nowadays, and has been happening in the last few months as well with the iTunes U, is availability is not the same than quality. So we may have a lot of resources, but at the end of the day, one of the risks could be we have to spend, again, a high amount of time in order to identify high quality resources. And many other connections that sometimes we make, and that could be misleading in terms of analysis. So that's it. Thank you very much.
So we have 15 minutes till the refreshments time. So are there any questions or comments?
First of all, what kind of results do you anticipate? Because this was a more presentation about the design and the background. What kind of results are you anticipating from this project?
Can you repeat the question?
If you can repeat the question for the recording.
Can you repeat?
Okay. So the question is, what kind of result are we anticipating? Our aim is to spread the word among 60 universities in the region. So I'm very pleased that this thing is happening at the same time that the OER, help me with the name, statement the UNESCO will promote in the next few months in Paris. So we would like to frame this little thing in that big thing because we think we help. I'm very critique on it, and I think it's going to take a generation of a change of generation in order to make a significant change. But we don't have to kill all the ones who are now here in order to change that paradigm. So it's going to be a very diverse scenario. Some small universities, probably wealthy or very well educated, will be adopting these sort of things very quickly, and those big public universities probably will be a bit more resistant, not because they don't like these sort of things, but the administrative structure is a burden that takes them more time to adopt. This is my guess. So it's going to be a diverse, I mean, we are dealing with the whole continent or subcontinent if you want.
So you not only want to collect data, but you want to influence policies.
Oh, sorry. Maybe you should point out that this is an action research project, so we are working
That's my
with
question.
a group of universities, and we would like to help them to implement educational practice. So the research is kind of, we have a purpose, and it's learning about this particular group of universities, so we will be able to help them to implement.
I promise to provide more details tomorrow here, but in a nutshell, each one of these 60 universities will have to create their own agenda of actions to do within their institution, not for us. So the idea is as soon as the money is run out, they will be able to, I don't know, define their own priorities on it.
Joseph.
Please.
Yeah, when you say a university adopts, are you thinking of more interest in them using OER or producing OER?
Okay, so the question is if I think it's more important the using or the
Or just not more important, but what are you focusing on, or are you working on both?
Well, again, it's a region, so it's a universe, it's a zoo of diversity. Personally, I do believe that it's more important the generation of contents than the using of them, because they're already using them somehow in a sort of informal way. As soon as they are contextualizing their resources or customizing the resources by their own needs, I think their colleagues will see the value of that.
Do you have a question?
Well,
Please.
I'm very nervous about you putting this on about open and it does not equal to sustainability, because I think that there won't be any sustainability without the openness. You're right, they're not equal. It's the closed system that we have now that's not sustainable. We know that, that is a fact. The governments cannot support the system we have now. Now, whatever system we move to, openness will be part of that system.
I fully support that.
Yeah, so when you're putting on there, it's not equal to sustainability. This makes me very nervous because I think it's true, but it's at the same time it's not. It does not show the full picture. There's too many people who come to me and say that openness, how are you going to sustain it? And I have an Irish background, so I always answer a question with a question. So how are you going to sustain the present system? We know we can't. So.
I fully support that. I'm just saying when I highlight that is we have to consider alternative models than the one that we are using nowadays, because with the current rules, this structure is not, we are not taking the best of it. That's just that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.